And last time I've spoken about the 10 fetters or samyojana, which, bind us or shackle us or shackle our mind to what's called samsara, the wheel of becoming. Through these limited and limiting filters that produce individual suffering, but also produce suffering on a systemic level. And it's a kind of a repetition compulsion which has, obviously led our species to break 7 out of 9 planetary boundaries. And, that's something really hard to comprehend. But that's happening precisely because of this inability of our species, to see clearly because of those Vipallasa. And to see clearly, that the laws of nature can't be bought with money. They can't be controlled, but we can attune to them. And these sessions here are all about trying to outgrow the old paradigm of domination and control and to find our footing in attunement and alignment. And it's a multi-generational work, of course, but we can begin. And by beginning, it simply means that we need to work with our perception, our capacity for perception to support us to return to a larger picture of who we are, where we are, and how it is. And that, those 3 concepts, that's a PIT instruction by Beth McCabe, a Diné ceremonial leader and international speaker. And her name, in her Diné language means woman stands shining. Beautiful name. And she's bringing a lot of light through her depths of understanding, and helping us to return back to our birthright, to viscerally experience ourselves as part of a living, intelligent earth who knows what to do since almost 5 billion years. And attuning to her and receiving instructions from her via our own earth bodies, our own human earth bodies with their very complex nervous systems and their elemental intelligence. Because our bodies and the body of the earth are made from the same elements. And these elements, they are not building blocks, but they are rather vibrational qualities. Earth element, hardness, water element, wetness and flow, and so on. And unfortunately, our contemporary nervous systems are very overstretched and stressed because our culture is not nervous system friendly. There's so much rushing and worrying on how to survive, how to pay the next bill. And we are all fortunate that we can meet in this way and we don't have to work right now. We can afford to take out an hour or a bit more from our lives in the morning, which is a great privilege in the Northern Hemisphere at least. And just the terrible fact, that 8% of the global population control 50% of the wealth of the planet. In a world which is colonized by an assumption of original sin and lack and wrongness, and that we have to fight, to survive. that is a projection. And I think it's just like us to stop for a moment and check in on your bodies, how this withholding of abundance affects our nervous systems. You know, this constant leaning into the future, the uncertainty, the fear that something is going to go wrong because there's not enough. Can you sense that? I can really sense it in myself, you know, when I do something, even if I enjoy it, I already think about what I'm going to do after. And I wonder if you also notice that in yourselves. That so much, you know, at the foundation of this cultural paradigm, which is starting to crack up currently. Because it's so based on not enough, not enough, not enough. And, you know, Beth McCabe says the paradigm of her own culture, you know, which now also under threat, of course, but the paradigm is about original abundance, which is the exact opposite of original sin, original goodness and abundance, and the fact that if you're here, you're part of the earth and the earth takes care of you. For us, that kind of visceral knowing is at the moment not available. And these meetings here are about trying to return, to awaken that again, to remember it. And to recognize, you know, that this original sin and lack and all of that, they are simply mental projections, which over time, you know, have become a self-fulfilling prophecy for us. And it's incredible, you know, to see how these projections, they can really, if they are enacted, you know, for hundreds of years, it's gonna happen. And, you know, therefore, the distortions of perceptions, the Vipallasa, are really very much a core teaching of the Buddha that can help us to get a perspective on this and see that we actually do have a choice to at least recognize it and take out some of the pressure by recognizing that it is a projection. And recognizing, you know, that we do have a choice, even we don't feel like we do have a choice, but we actually do have. Because the belief in it, you know, the complete getting lost in it is part of the territory. Because it becomes all-consuming. And once, you know, we stop and we feel the pressure in the body, we can choose to just be with the pressure without adding any stories to it. And that's, you know, it's not comfortable, but it can be done. And in that way, you know, we can enact a choice to return to a deeper place in ourselves from which wise action can emerge. A place that is true and universal, based on our deep embeddedness in reality, in the web of life, on relationship, on listening, and on belonging. And you know, I have been speaking about the list of the Vipallasa earlier, and today I want to pick out the first one. The first of the four is seeing what is impermanent, anicca, as permanent nature. So that assumption, you know, that things are really separate phenomena. And if we really start to look more deeply, we can see things are not separate, and they are actually processes. They're in constant flow, they're in constant change. We can see it with our bodies, we can see it when we look outside. I will look at the garden here, which is constantly changing, and everything. Here, the meetings, on the Wednesday meetings, sometimes there's a lot of people, sometimes there's little people, sometimes there's a medium amount of people. It's constantly different, it's constantly changing. And then, really taking it in that this impermanence doesn't only apply to so-called things, but also to worldviews, to conditioning, to even to something as vast as a cultural paradigm. And usually, we sit inside that paradigm, not being aware that this paradigm has also a beginning, a middle, and an end. It starts to creep up, and then it starts to become enacted more and more until it no longer serves life. And then it starts to crumble. And we are now at a time in history, where the paradigm we have been growing up in is crumbling. And we can feel it in our bones. We can feel it in our nervous systems that something is different than just, I would say before COVID. COVID was the beginning of a realization, that we are all totally connected. And COVID was like a very amazing phenomenon which brought that home. And then afterwards, when COVID ended, more or less, now we find ourselves in a different world. And we all know we can't go back, but we can go deeper. That's the only way, is to go deeper. Because if you can't get out of it, you have to really get into it and investigate and see and learn and be changed by that learning. And Joanna Macy called that the great unraveling, which needs to come before the great turning, before the shift. We all feel in our bones that it is kind of coming, but it can't be controlled, but it can be invited by making space in our own hearts, in our own minds, and inviting it in. And and the first step is to allow a certain amount of chaos, at least internal chaos, because the chaos is what opens up the new potential. If it all stays the same, then there might not be chaos, but also it will just stay the same, and it doesn't really serve us anymore. It's cracking up. So taking an interest, what's coming through the cracks, what wants to be known, what wants to be born, what wants to be lived. And this is, where we really need each other to stay steady in that process and not panic, and shut down in fear. It's okay to be afraid, but we can bring awareness to that fear, to the anxiety, to the uncertainty. We can just add awareness to it. And let awareness be the ground we stand on, the refuge in Buddha, the refuge in knowing. And in that way, we can be part of melting our individual and cultural resistance against the change which is needed. The kindness we can bring to our own experience and to each other as we are stumbling, through this process. And according to the Buddha, there is two important supports for practice. And the first one is the voice of another. So a spiritual friend, who we can talk things through with. And the second one is a wise attention. Yoniso Manasikara in the Pali language, and it has the word yoni in it, which is the Pali word for womb. Yoniso Manasikara. Bringing things back into the womb of awareness rather than completely getting lost in them. The fear, the uncertainty, the doubt, the boredom, or whatever comes up as a defense mechanism. So let's now, find a posture we can sustain for about almost 40 minutes for a guided meditation, and, bringing awareness to how we are right now. What you've brought with you today to this gathering. And sensing the weight of the body on the cushion on the chair. And the fact that we are together in this pocket of sanity, willing to look at what is happening. And sensing the gravity of the earth, gently holding us in place. And just letting go of any stress, letting it drop down into the soil beneath where you are sitting right now. And breathing up the stillness and the vastness of the body of the earth. So Yoni Somanasikara, wise attention, bringing our experience into the womb of awareness rather than identifying with it. And calling to mind our ancestors who knew belonging to earth in their bones. Our modern human and human ancestors. Remembering, that we belong to a long lineage. Which emerged out of the ancient oceans, went through so many trials and tribulations to end up like us here in front of our computers today. That sense of belonging to a lineage. Lineage of life, and also lineage of the Buddha, who has come up with these pragmatic meditation teachings to support consciousness to free itself from bondage, from the Vipallasa. From the fetters. And the human birth is considered to be the most fortunate birth to do this work. And really taking it in, we have what it takes, to do this work. We have these bodies, we have these minds, we have a teaching. It's all there. Then, calling to mind the future ones, whose lives will be shaped by what we decide, by what we do. As a culture and as global citizens. And how, can we become good ancestors, do our part, opening up to what wants to be known at this time. This, self-regulating intelligence of this planet, which we can sense because our bodies and the body of the planet are of one process. And they are calling us. Calling us into relationship, into conscious relationship. Through the body, not through the mind. It's that elemental intelligence. It's an intuitive knowing connection. And we need to allow the space for that self-regulating intelligence to do the work. By finding our way back to this visceral knowing that we are part of a living, intelligent earth, to remember that and bring it forward into this time. And integrate it with contemporary lives over the years to come. It's not going to be a quick fix, but it starts first, ever so faintly hearing the calling, and then inviting it in, opening to it, attuning to it, aligning with it. It slowly has an impact. It's an emergence. And we can connect through it, through the aliveness in our bodies. The vitality which comes to us, through eating, drinking, and breathing the planet every day. A process, which cannot be controlled by the thinking mind. But the thinking mind can support that process by, helping to put in place suitable causes and conditions, and then acting on what is known. And, supporting change in ourselves by coming to these islands of coherence and joining as a community, tiptoeing into the chaos a little bit, the uncertainty, and slowly befriending that, and also noticing our capacity to be with that. We can do that. This is part of how evolution happens. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the chaos between two equilibriums. That's how systems theory looks at this. There's nothing wrong. It's just a bit painful, and discomfort is there for sure when there is so much stretching happening, so much growth. It's like going on a search, vision quest, throwing oneself into the uncertainty in a kind of ritualistic way. And knowing, that only from a deeper place can we wisely participate in this in a way, which is felt through the body. An intuitive knowing, which then the thinking mind can help to translate into the world, by going places and making phone calls and whatever. That impermanence, aliveness, vitality, this constant flow, and giving it space, and not, getting stuck at the banks of that river, but coming back to the middle again and again, and allowing ourselves to be carried together with others who are swimming in the same river with us. No longer resisting. No longer you're trying to build walls and project, but allowing and participating, and through that participation growing in capacity. That's the only way. the mind, wanders off into thinking about something, as soon as you notice it, to gently bring it back to that vitality, flow, aliveness, impermanence, constant change. And coming to the middle and allowing ourselves to be carried by that. And listening into the spaciousness, the silence, the vastness. And that, that high-pitched sound or that vibrational quality is the expression of impermanence. There's no aliveness without impermanence, and the other way around. then finding safety in the purpose of that work, the purpose to attune and to align with reality of what's happening now. By listening to what we belong to. And by doing that, inviting the new paradigm to become established through us, one by one. And then, seeing how that expresses in our lives. Through our skills, through our location, through our capacities, it will find expression. And trusting that. And spending time with people who have of like mind. It can really help, to bring forth that new version of yourself. It just, needs to get some space by releasing the old, allowing it to move on, making space for what needs to be born now. And before we come slowly to the end, I'd like to share a part of a poem by Naomi Shihab Nye, Kindness is the poem. It's the title of the poem. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out onto the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is I you have been looking for. It is I you have been looking for, and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. So in a couple of minutes I'm gonna ring the bell.